members of council. I'm going to start off, believe it or not, on a humorous note. With respect to notification of public meetings, there was one point where we were postering in the downtown east side for upcoming open houses, and we were, our engineering department was going to, as we were postering on poles that we weren't supposed to be postering on. So we really feel like we did make all kinds of efforts in all kinds of ways to notify about public events. It is ironic that the last speaker is of Chinese origin. It has really been dismaying for us as staff to listen to the people who have spoken over the course of the last 3 days about information that has been passed around their community in both Chinese and English. And I'd like to read you an excerpt of some of the material, the package that has been referred to by previous delegations, to let you know that the type of information that has been passed around is actually quite extraordinary. Is planned neighborhood predominantly single-family homes to allow multiple family dwellings such as duplexes, row houses, 4-story townhouses, 4 to 6-story low-rise apartments, and 8 to 12-story buildings. That causes us concern because, of course, the bulk of the single-family area in Marpole, even before the changes that we recommended in our report, we're not going to change, but even more so as a result of the changes, we are recommending that 80% of the single-family area is going to remain single-family. Another point that was raised in this handout is, quote, under the authority of the Vancouver Charter, once the city has rezoned a lot from single-family home to duplex, it can further rezone it to even higher density, such as townhouses or buildings, without further consultation with the residents so that owners lose their voice and control. The third point I'd like to mention is that within their material is it says rezoning to multiple family immediately increases property taxes even though the lot value still contains a single family home. Over the long term, single-family home increases in value faster than multiple-family homes, so in the future the property will not be worth as much money as it would have been done as a single-family home. And finally, the last point that causes us alarm, should cause you alarm, is the city benefits from increased density, but because it creates more units paying property tax. The reality is, of course, is that residential does not pay its full weight in terms of taxes and then the services that are required to service the residential. The first point in Marpole that we have to start with is refuting the material that has been to us. We must counter the misinformation that's been handed out in the community. It's as alarming to us as planners that has caused the almost hysteria of the people in Marpole, and we really do believe that we need to put the facts out there so that it can calm some people down and realize that it is not a rezoning plan that is going to be coming before council at some point, that it is a draft community plan which sets a framework for redevelopment. And again, now with 80% of the single family to remain as single family. So for me, the area of consultation and the issues that I've heard over the last 3 days has raised questions in my own head. You know, I began to think of the process that had occurred over the last year and a half, and so I asked staff over the last few days to pull up the boards that had gone to the various community meetings. And I was really intrigued and concerned that perhaps we might have, in our head, been talking about land use, but perhaps the community itself didn't understand that we were talking about land use. So I brought some of the boards and I'd like to just take the microphone and go over to and illustrate some of the boards that were presented at the previous open houses and meetings. Thank you, Kevin. So starting with Marpole, this actually started, this is a board that was displayed for the Canby 2 plan back in 2011, which looked at the area of the Canby 3 and started talking about the types of building forms that could be located eventually in the Canby 3 neighborhood. That goes back to 2011. So it was clear illustration in that particular area of Canby 3, which would have gone over to This is the area of the board from February of this year, which shows on Granville Street now, the area west of Granville was shown as traditional or courtyard row houses across the lane from mixed-use buildings. So again, at the beginning of this year, we were very clearly showing the Granville as well as the transition area from the buildings that we were proposing along Granville west to the west of Granville in that area. This is, to me, the most interesting one. This is from the spring and summer of 2012. And again, this is all Marpole. And in a survey that went out to 515 people filled out, 51% showed that there should be more housing located in the area centered on Canby Street. That's where they felt that the majority of new housing should be located. 34% said that they supported it on additional housing on Oak, 29% on Granville, and 32% in the rental area saying that more housing was needed for the rental stock. So I don't really want to get into a he said or she said or any of that, but in our minds, we really did feel we were talking about additional heights and densities and uses in these areas. In addition, we have two surveys that were submitted. One was submitted on the east side of Canby in support of even higher densities than what we were showing in the draft plan in February. And the other was actually on the west side of Canby Street, where a number of people from 60th Avenue and Ash Street, again, where we had shown townhouses, were actually for Marpole is we really thought we were listening to what the community was telling us at the time, and we thought that we had been putting it down in terms of building typologies and in terms of responding to the community concerns, as you can see here, in all the different areas where we think that people have had concerns. But we're certainly, through the recommendations that are before you today, have indicated our support for changing some of the areas of concern from the townhouses that we were showing into back to single family, and that would be the areas in here and in here. And in addition, of course, we've recommended on west of Canby that this be taken out and added to the Canby area, and that was our suggestion. We've also heard comments from many comments today about people feeling nervous that we have some kind of hidden agenda with respect to even more density in that area in putting them into the Canby plan, and that's just not correct. So I'm going to turn myself just to give you more illustrations. These are Grandview Woodlands boards here, along here, which are all from, this is March 2013, this is January 2012, this is from an Aboriginal Friendship Center meeting, this is also from February of 2013, and we have on these boards information in Grandview Woodlands, and these are not our marks on the plans. These are marks that say, need more density here, increase density in and around the station area. We had a variety of housing options is good, no linkage to Hastings. So there was discussion in Grandview Woodlands part of the Grand Woodlands process. Again, what I think happened, though, which caused the disconnect, is we had it at a very schematic level, but we didn't take it down until the very first time that the Grandview Woodlands people saw it in June. And so to move from this very general discussion of where densities and heights should be to the idea of landing in an emerging directions report has caused the significant concern that arose in Grandview Woodlands. So I do think that we were talking about land use and density, but we didn't connect the dots between the very theoretical land use and density discussions with an actual draft plan or emerging directions that the community saw for the first time. The conceptual discussions that we had to the more detailed land use plan because of the concern in 4 of the areas, and that's why we are recommending an extensive addition to the time frame, as well as the idea of a citizen assembly. So, my next point. We were asked to prepare, and when those plans come before you, you as members of council will be faced with difficult decisions. That decisions, of course, are going to be based on the community input that you're hearing tonight, community input that you're going to be hearing when the area plans come before you on an individual basis. But as you directed us in the process at the very beginning, that the plans were to also reflect the affordable housing initiatives, Greenest City initiatives, Transportation 2040, and other city policies. Been prepared, we tried to do that, and it will be a difficult decision for you. The reason I'd like to, Jane is here, good. The vision work that went on was excellent, was really, really excellent. But visions are not plans. There is no land use map associated with the visions. There was no specific locations decided for the various types of housing that was supported. And therefore, the vision took it to a place where the community could get consensus about a particular point, but a land use plan which put in place how that fit in the community and how it responded to the overall was the thing that wasn't done. And that is the difference between a vision and the area plans that you're undertaking. I was unlucky enough, I guess, to work in a jurisdiction down in Southern California where council, that you can have voter initiatives in Southern California, where citizens, if they get a certain number of names on a petition, can cause an issue to be on a ballot. And in Newport Beach, for example, Newport Beach, California, a city can pass a plan, but if the citizens get a certain number of people to pass a ballot initiative, that then it has to go to a vote from then on as to future land use changes. And so what's happened in Newport Beach is that they have a plan in place the council adopted, but there's a voter initiative which says no building taller than 4 stories can be built in the city. And so if a building comes forward that wants to be taller than 4 stories, that it has to go has been handed over to the citizenship. And as a result, council has no ability to influence that decision at all. It can be an amazing public benefit. It can provide social housing. It could provide office uses. It could provide a number of other uses. It's an example of if you hand the entire decision-making process to the people. And in my view, it really does fetter the council responsibility for being the ones to make those decisions that have to be made. As I said at the beginning, I really do think that things have changed even since 1998 when the Dunbar Vision Plan was passed is that the easy choices have been made in terms of where to accommodate growth in the future. And it is becoming more and more difficult, and you and future councils are going to be faced with harder decisions as to how to accommodate those people which are coming to Vancouver. I know you had questions, specific questions, Councillor Carr and Councillor Reimer. I'm going to ask my ADs to cover those, but my recommendations would be for the West End that we proceed on schedule. For the downtown east side, I do think I mentioned in an interview yesterday that Race Baxman made a cogent argument for a deferral. I can really respect how he's trying to walk that tightrope between wanting to deliver something on time, to council in a very responsible way, and yet understand that he needs more time. And his position was that, gee, maybe it could still come forward in November as a draft and then later on. I think, quite frankly, that it would be my recommendation to council after hearing his presentation and some of the others that the plan be deferred for 6 weeks until maybe the end of January to allow for that committee to land. Downtown east side would be the most difficult plan to land, and I really do think, thanks to the very skillful negotiations that we are that Race Baxman and the two chairs of the LAP committee and all of those who are participating in that process have come to, are very close, and I really do believe that a 6-week deferral is in order to accommodate their needs. With respect to Marpole, I certainly heard what the people had to say, and the primary area of concern, I think, for them remains the number 2 area, which we are showing as a potential to be studied as part of the Canby plan, and we as planners are still recommending that for your consideration. And then finally, with respect to Grandview Woodlands, we're recommending that the recommendations stand before you. I do think that we're going to have a problem in delivering that plan to you in a year, because the community has, through their presentations over the last few days, indicated that they want a consultation process that is joint, that is meaningful, about how the Citizen Assembly would even work. And quite frankly, I offer my hand and my assistance to sit down with them and to say that when we come forward with that report, whatever formal or informal mechanism is chosen for working with with GWAC or whatever people we're working with to bring forward how the community assembly will work, citizen assembly will work, that we'd like to do it together with the community. We have absolutely no reservation about figuring out together how this is going to work. We're doing it for them. We want to do it with them. And so, we feel that the recommendations as is allow for that, and would certainly welcome any citizen assembly. So with that, I'm just going to turn it quickly over to my two assistant deputies, directors, to outline the questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, members of Council, Matt Shillito, Assistant Director of Planning. We did receive a number of questions from both Councillor Reimer and Councillor Carr, and I'm going to deal with the ones relating to the Grandview Woodlands and the Marpole processes. I'll start with Councillor Reimer's questions, and I'll forgive me, but I'll read out the question and I'll be as concise as I can with a response. The first question was, is it the intention, if these recommendations pass, to continue in-depth planning in Grandview Woodland, both sub-area planning and community engagement on the citizen assembly design? The answer is yes. We would continue sub-area and community-wide planning. We're sharing some information on the planning process to date with people who haven't been involved, and discussing the issues that were raised in the emerging directions that were published in June. And at the same time, we would begin to work on the composition and roles of the Citizens Assembly. The second question was, where did the population projections in the staff presentation come from? They came from an analysis of the draft land use proposals in each of the plan areas. What we did was calculate the volume of new development that would be proposed under those land use directions, and then we applied an estimated rate of growth based on past trends. It's important to note that not all of the development shown in the plans would actually take place over the 30-year period. There are obviously constraints on individual sites coming forward for development, and there's also finite demand for development and finite market. So we, in general, estimate about a third of the development shown in the plans would come forward in the 30-year period. But that varies a little bit depending on the type of development. The third question was, can you speak to the efficacy of mail drops in an area with a high number of renters? My understanding is that there is no requirement directly to each mail slot in multi-unit buildings, nor do they necessarily have all the addresses of basement suites or laneway houses. At present, we've been using unaddressed ad mail. It does go to every household, and that includes apartments and basement suites and laneway houses. But we do recognize that there are some issues, clearly, with people noticing that mail. It does not have their name and address on it. And while none of the methods for mail drops is perfect, we will sit down as a matter of urgency moving forward with our public engagement staff to look at some different options to see what is the best way to get mail to people most predictably. The fourth question from Councillor Reimer was, there are a couple of people who suggested that although they own their own homes, this is relating to Marpole, rezonings would result in them losing their homes. Could you provide some comment on how changing the permitted development in the zoning would result in a homeowner losing their homes? This is a critical point, obviously. No one would be forced to move or sell their home as a result of a change in zoning. The new zoning simply and only increases the choice of housing options on a property. In the case of Marpole, that's primarily from the single family to duplexes and townhouses, but also some low-rise apartments, which we believe are generally compatible with the single-family character of the neighborhood. And importantly, the zoning would include options to rebuild a single-family house or build a duplex on a single lot. So there remain options to stay within the property, to rebuild on that property a single-family house or a duplex without any consolidation of lots. The fifth question was, there is a process advisory group for Marpole, but there is some suggestion that it is secret and or inaccessible. Could you comment on the group and how much they've been engaged? This group is called the Marpole Community Plan Outreach Group. It's certainly not secret or inaccessible. We recruited members in the launch phase of the plan. In terms of renters and owners, different demographics, age groups, ethnicities, and so on. But we kept the membership open, and we didn't turn anybody away. And then, in accordance with the terms of reference for the plan, it focused on process, and it met at key stages through the process to advise on outreach, and the results from all of those meetings are posted online. The sixth question was, a few people have referred to Area 1 as being pulled out and suggested if they live in that area, they are no longer part of the neighborhood. As I understand it, it's only the land use proposals that would change in Area 1, and that residents living in those areas would in every way be able to continue to participate in the plan. That's absolutely correct. If Council were to pass the recommendations, people living in Area 2 would continue to participate in every way in the plan. And in fact, one of the options would be for the land use issues, once satisfactorily resolved in that area, to be folded into a revised Marpole plan. Moving now to Councillor Carr's questions. The first one was, are you open to establishing a joint management team with community representatives in Granby Woodland immediately to collaborate on how to determine the continued terms of engagement and community consultation? Our recommendation would be to use the existing process advisory group, known as PACE for short, and that group could be asked to help us advise on further engagement and consultation, rather than creating a new group. Second question was, are you open to a process that enables community approval of each community plan? We wouldn't recommend seeking community approval of the plans, but we would recommend expanding our efforts to engage community support through community-wide surveys, as one example. The third question was, many speakers have asked for a different, more genuine, two-way collaboration. And I'll identify a couple. In Grandview Woodlands, I think we've been hearing loud and clear that people want more dialogue sessions, more focus groups, more workshops. They are the best forums, frankly, for collaboration and dialogue, so we would recommend more of those going forward. We also think the Citizens Assembly would be a great opportunity for deeper engagement and dialogue. And we would continue to use open houses, but really more as check-in sessions through the process and to reach a wider audience who perhaps may not be able or have the inclination to participate in a workshop. And in Marpole, I think similarly, we would set up some dialogue sessions with small groups. We as Mr. Jackson mentioned, we're very anxious to clarify the content of the plan, the goals of the plan, the background to it, its potential implications, and of course to discuss the potential changes to the plan that we've identified already and others that we may identify. The fourth question was, has the information generated out of the citizen surveys in Marpole been shared, and if so, how? Well, the results of the city surveys, as well as all of the other process events, have been posted online, and we also summarize them in kind of what we heard sections in the subsequent stages of the process. We have not shared the results of the citizens' petitions, if that was the focus of that question. The fifth question was, is there any data or analysis on the impacts of upzoning on land values and taxes? This is a really complex topic, and we would really need to report back to you in a little more detail with some help from our finance and real estate staff. We do know that rezoning can raise property values, and that if those values go up at a greater rate than the city average, then taxes would increase at a greater rate on those properties. We don't have great comparable data to hand. Properties, there's an option for people who've lived in the house or the property for over 10 years to have the existing the use of the property used as the means of assessing value. People over 55 can defer their taxes and then until after their death. I think the most important point really is that we are working with the city's Property Tax Policy Review Commission to identify additional measures that could help to mitigate property tax increases resulting from rezoning. That's a specific part of their mandate, both residential and commercial properties. And they'll be looking at a bunch of additional measures, working with staff, and a report, I understand, is due to come before Council in the spring of next year on that. The final question from Councillor Carr was, is it possible to change the number 2 area in Marpole to a number 1 area, in other words, keeping it in the planning area, refrain from rezoning the single-family areas, and accommodate the projected population increase along corridors? What would zoning look like along corridors? I think the first thing I'd say is there's really no hard and fast rule as to how much growth needs to be accommodated. And we haven't had an opportunity to do an analysis of where you might move that growth from that single-family area. But I think the simple answer is yes, we could, of course, retain the existing single-family zoning in Area 2 should Council direct us to do so. Thank you. I think those are all the questions we received on Marpole and Grandview Woodlands.
Just one point before we address the questions with respect to the other 2 areas. One point that I forgot to mention in my covering minutes and notes was the issue of the number of people who came over the last 3 days from the Chinese community in Marpole. And I was talking to Mandarin. She's one of our planning staff. She has been leading the effort in Marpole to reach out to the Chinese community. She set up 12 special meetings held with the Chinese community, and for the 3 sets of surveys that went out in Marpole were both the long form and the short form were both in English and in Chinese. I just wanted to point that out before we move on to the
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, Madam Chair, Kevin McNeely, Assistant Director of Planning. There weren't a lot of questions about the West End, but I was asked to respond to the issues raised by West End neighbours about the process. One of the issues was the plan is too vague and there's no clarity. We don't believe that's the case. The form issues were forefront as one of the key issues in the West End since the very start of the process, and we started discussing those right away. Earlier this year, much earlier in March and April, we brought out maps that showed areas of change and areas of no change, block by block, and showed proposed heights and density changes. We brought those out again in June with more clarity on heights and densities, so we've been very clear about the proposed changes in areas which will and will not change. There was a request that we need to do a mail out. We have done that twice in the West End through AdMail to roughly 38,000 addresses. We will be doing that one more time before the plan is adopted, so we hope that gets the notification out in addition to our other mechanisms. We didn't involve everyone in the West End, that is true, but as you know, we've been to over 100 events with 7,000 people, and we've involved those who wanted to be involved. And more importantly, we've gone to where West Enders go, to the Davie Street parades, to the Pride Parade, to the Car Free Day, West End Days. We go to the major events, and we set up to allow anyone to talk to us who is willing to. Surveys, we did do surveys in the West End. We did them both in paper, we did them online, and we did them via iPads at all these events so people could enter their information whenever possible. There was a request for a 3D image of build-out. You'll see on the materials online that we have done a 3D rendering of the potential build-out under the new policies over the next 30 years, and they were presented at communities. Not clear. We did do surveying on the benefits and public amenities. We did bring them out in the proposed policy changes and set some priorities for key public benefit and amenities, such as replacement of the community center, the replacement of the aquatic center, a new home for community. So we've been very clear about the priorities in the West End and how they will be met in various areas through growth and change. We have not shown bylaws or zoning changes. Council, as you know, these are technical implementations of the plan. We've been very clear what the changes will be, and they will be reflected in the zoning bylaws. We will bring the bylaw changes back to you when we bring the plan back to you, and in that period between the plan adoption and public hearing, there will be several months for those who are technically inclined to review those bylaw changes. No new planning for schools. We have indicated that there is a need to do planning for schools on the maps and on the proposed policies, particularly around the community center area. We've also been actively meeting with the VSB to find new school sites in the West End, so that is underway. There has been no summary of consultation or feedback. As with the other plans, we have posted all the summaries of the consultation for the first two phases. The last summary is coming shortly. What we found is there's been significant support in the West End for the policy changes. Over half, close to 3/4 of the response support for the directions. And we need information sessions so people understand. We agree. Should Council choose to move ahead with the West End plan on schedule as recommended, we are intending to set up information sessions for community members at all times and days and places, and we see this as an opportunity to sit down with West Enders and literally go chapter by chapter to ensure those who want to know more get the information they need in order to speak intelligently to Council. So we are recommending that the West End plan proceed. There is a lot of support in the community, and it is ready to go. In terms of the downtown east side, I had a number of questions emailed to me from councillors. What I want to start by in conflict because they're very difficult issues. I think council needs to understand the incredible amount of effort put in by that LAP committee. These people are amazing. I've gotten to know a lot of them, and I'm so glad I have. I feel better for it. They're amazing people who have some pretty significant challenges in their own lives. And the fact that they come every second Tuesday to meet with us is a testament to their love of their community. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Excuse me. There was a question about the extra timeline that would be needed to address downtown east side concerns. As the committee members and others have acknowledged, the downtown east side plan is on the cusp of being finished. It's a very good plan. Thank you. And we have brought the information and all the policies out to the committee this summer through our last round of outreach, and they are just getting drafts of the plan. What they'll see in those drafts is that it's the same policies as we brought to them in June. So I acknowledge that it's a challenge to read through it. We don't suspect there will be any surprises for them, but they do need time. Our key reason for moving ahead on the downtown east side plan is our concern about housing and development pressure. We need to get some of that affordable housing built. We need to make some zoning changes to ensure that housing can be built and low-income housing can be protected and assets can be protected. Would, as Mr. Jackson suggested earlier, if you asked us for a suggestion, my suggestion, as well as Mr. Jackson's, would be to consider the plan at the end of January. And this is for a couple reasons. One, that would give 2 to 3 more months for the committee to digest the actual long written text of the plan. And two, it wouldn't have a significant impact on the zoning changes, which we anticipated going to public hearing early in the new year anyway. Those changes are key, as I mentioned, to ensure that the affordable housing gets built. Is it possible for the Downtown East Side plan to be submitted in November with parts being draft, and what would be the impact on the process and timeline? As I've just suggested, we are anticipating or recommending that it would go in January instead, but I wouldn't suggest that we bring portions of local economy hiring in order to get the comprehensive social innovation embedded in the plan. 10 development applications put on hold. Pending the adoption of the plan, we are recommending to Council that the interim rezoning policy and development management guidelines be extended, which I think is a good idea. In terms of development permit applications, property owners do have development allowances that they're legally entitled to under zoning. There is a process in the Vancouver Charter where Council can change that, but frankly, it's a long and complicated process, and the faster we get the plan to you, the more unnecessary that would be. So it would take longer than it would to bring the plan back to you in January, if that's your will. And those were all of the questions. Thank you.
Okay, so that is the staff presentation. Thank you very much for those including comments and answers to the questions that were emailed in. I'm going to propose that we start doing questions from councillors for the next 10 minutes, take a break at 5:30 for a quick dinner break, come back at 6:15 to continue with questions from councillors and then into debate. Any concerns with that? Councillor Reimer.
I don't have a concern with it because I suspect we have at least a couple of hours of questions and debate left. But I do think if we had questions for staff, emailing them before the break so they have time to work on them would help expedite this a bit.
I agree with that. I think that's a great idea. So we will start questions now. As I said, break at 5:30 to 6:15. During that time, please email questions into staff. We'll come back at 6:15 to continue with the answers to our questions. So we'll start the questions with Councillor Meigs. And please hit your button. I turned your mic off. You have to hit your microphone button, or I can do it. All right, there you go.
Thanks, Mr. Jackson. That was very comprehensive. The only issue that to me was one that came up again today, which is the Kettle project on Commercial Drive in the Grandview Woodlands plan. And it's fair to say we've heard from both sides of the community about what to do there. Today urged to allow them to proceed, previously warned that it would be a very bad idea. Are there options that you can propose that would allow the community, staff, and the various stakeholders to make a judgment in the next period of time about how to proceed on that project? Obviously, it's up to them to go forward if they wish, but is it completely out of the question that they should do so, or are there ways that they might be able to proceed if they thought that was in their best interest?
Through the chair, I can think of two different options. One is for the Kettle to be considered under the interim zoning policies that Council did put in place when it had adopted the terms of reference. We could take a look and report back on whether it qualified for that particular category, or the second option would be that it be treated as a priority as one of the first things for the Citizen Assembly to look at.
Yeah, I think the proponents would have to make a judgment that Council can't make in their place, nor could the community, about how they feel the community is responding and whether there would be a positive discussion about it. But if the, I guess my concern is that with as much as a year or more of further planning, it could be quite some time before they were clear on what the. So you could propose some options perhaps that would not go ahead.
That's correct.
Or not, up to them. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Meigs. Mayor Robertson.
Thank you, Chairperson. So questions on the Marpole, the Marpole neighborhood that's immediately adjacent to the Cambie corridor west. We had a probably the majority of the speakers who came were from the area, identified Area 2 there, single-family homes just west of Cambie, along Ash and Heather. The Cambie Corridor Plan, as approved by Council, correct me if I'm wrong, it has 6 stories approved, up to 6 stories along Cambie, along the arterial. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in the Cambie Corridor Plan as approved, is there any specific language to how that transitions into that single-family neighborhood, or where that transition happens?
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor, yes, the plan has development guidelines which indicate that they have to bring the back
Just west of Cambie,
That's
between
correct.
Cambie and Ash.
That's correct.
So there's that neighborhood, what was to be Phase 3, what we've been calling Cambie 3, was deciding how that transition happens into the neighborhoods all along the Cambie corridor,
That's correct.
adjacent to what has already been approved
That's
in
correct.
terms of heights.
We did the highest density immediately with the lots fronting onto Cambie, and we were, as part of phase 3, going to be looking at the shoulder areas, going out a block in each direction and looking at the appropriate land uses in those areas.
Okay, and can you remind council and everyone that's tuned in, the Phase 3, the timing of Phase 3 as currently projected?
Again, it was depending on the workload and the number of plans that we were going to be able to work on in 2014. It was one of our priorities. We're bringing forward the terms of reference for council's consideration at the beginning of 2014 to commence a process that would last probably at least a year, maybe.
There are 3 different planning processes overlapping that particular neighborhood that is identified as Area 2 there on the Marpole community map. That we've got the original Cambie corridor, Phase 2, which is the density right along Cambie, right along the arterial. We have Phase 3 for Cambie, which is out in 2014, 2015.
Correct?
And then we have the Marpole community plan, the neighborhood planning process.
That's correct.
So I think there was a lot of angst around how fast all this was moving, how directly that neighborhood is impacted by the plan versus the Cambie corridor Phase 3. I think at council we've been living and breathing this stuff for several years, so I can appreciate that in the neighborhood it's not as clear. I'm concerned about Inframed, some of the language of flyers or packages that were out there that were absolutely incorrect as to what change might mean, what rezoning, how it might impact single-family homes there. Or just to drill down on that a little bit, we circulated information, and from your earlier report, we had 62 meetings, community meetings in Marpole. So there obviously was lots of information there, but it sounds like there was a whole other set of information circulated within Marpole that was inaccurate and inflammatory, I think, based on some of the reactions that we got here. And in your background as our was malicious language circulated in a neighborhood going through a community plan. Have you seen this before in other cities and chapters of your life?
Unfortunately, I have, Mr. Mayor, that especially when feelings get very heated, that people feel that they have to make a point, and sometimes they exaggerate the truth in order to raise the level of fear in a community. So unfortunately, yes, I have seen that.
Okay. Well, I'll look forward to putting a motion forward that clarifies language. I think we obviously to do a lot more work in Marpole in particular, because of all of this uncertainty and the mixed bag of language that's out there about what it means for the neighborhoods. So it's my time.
You're at your time.
We'll come back to that.
We don't have time for another full set of 5 minutes of questions and answers, so I will call a recess until 6:15. We'll come back at that time to continue to address our questions. Thank you.